I loved my school and what I was doing. However, in February 2020, right before the pandemic, a student took a gun to school. He had no intention of using it, but he accidentally shot and killed another student. It was just devastating because one of the students involved had been my students the previous year. The school is a good school. The kids are good kids, but it was hard to shake that off. After that, I started looking into other things I could do. As a male educator at your school site, it can get lonely. Only 23% of K-12 educators in America are male. And just think about what this gender gap means for your male students. They experience disproportionate levels of discipline. This is a show for male educators who want to feel more understood by their community and want to create emotionally safe classrooms and schools for the next generation of male students. Welcome to Unmasking with Male Educators. Hey, what's up, folks? Welcome to Unmasking with Male Educators, the Taking Off the Mask podcast. I've been doing a lot of thinking and not only researching, but reading about what is happening with education, what has been happening, what is happening now, and as we start to see new things taking off in terms of how education is going to transform, what's about to happen. And today I'm going to be sharing some pieces from an article by Devlin Peck called Why Teachers Quit and What You Can Do Instead. We know that the teaching profession is in danger. We can see it under a lot of attacks, but we also can see teachers no longer being willing to withstand the pressure and chaos that schools are providing. Let's jump in. I'm going to start with the first topic, and I guess maybe I'll give you a context. For those of you who have not listened to this show before, don't know who I am, my name is Ashanti Branch. I was a teacher for 13 years, 10 years in the classroom and 3 years as an administrator. Teaching called me. I was never planning to be a teacher, but when I came to the teaching profession, I was all of a sudden shocked by what I was seeing on the teaching side of education. Now, I give you some context of my student life. I've been both a very bad student, I've been a very good student, and I've been administrator, and I've been a teacher. So imagine all the layers of where I have seen education. Everything I'm going to talk about are things that have been really highlighting to me. And I think something that we need to be doing in this conversation is how we're going to improve education. Not just for the highest performing kids, but for all students. How do we make schools accessible by all students every day? Okay, so that's the context of my journey in education. I'll also let you know, just for context, that I've taught in both public, private, charter, and I've taught in high school and middle school. And one of them was a K-8 school, so you can call that, it's like middle school. I taught in the middle school age. This article is from Devlin Peck, titled Why Teachers Quit and What You Can Do Instead. And this part is about burnout. And if you've ever burned out at any job or any profession or any passion career, you know the feeling of burnout is deep, and it runs deep in not only how we feel and how we show up every day. You can find the link to this article in the show notes so you can read it yourself. I'm just going to read over a couple of sections that are really highlighting for this episode today, okay? The first one is burnout. If you've ever been burned out before, if you ever experienced it, you know what it feels like. And if you haven't, I want you to know that when you show up every day and you don't want to be there, you're already exhausted before you even show up in the morning. Maybe signs of burnout, right? But let me tell you about what the educators have said about burnout. The National Education Association describes burnout as a condition in which an educator has exhausted the personal and professional resources necessary to do the job. The most common symptoms of burnout include change in appetite, weight gain or loss, anxiety or depression, fatigue, sleep disorders, irregular hair loss, lack of job satisfaction, inability to enjoy downtime. Recent data from Education Support shows that 35% of teachers are struggling with recurring migraines. Meanwhile, 55% have trouble sleeping. Many of the issues teachers face are worsening year after year. For example, Education Support found that 8% more teachers reported irritability and mood swings in the 2023 survey than in the 2022 survey. Now, we know that 2022 and 2023 were some of the COVID shifting years, but teachers were experiencing more irritability once we were coming out of that season than before. One of the quotes from one of the educators said, "I was burned out. There were too many extra demands and no added time to meet them. Support was waning from administration in discipline and or academic problems. Administration would nearly always try to get me to cave to the students and or their parents." Now, listen, as a former teacher and as a former administrator, I've been on both sides. I've been on the side of having the pressure for parents asking for support, and I've been a teacher who's like, I've given all the support I can give. The student is not doing their part. And if you're a teacher who is giving your best and you have a student who comes back at the end of the year who's like, oh, you know what? Can you make me a packet so I can pass this class? You may, now this is my personal experience. I'm not speaking about every teacher or what their scenarios are. I'm telling you, many of the scenarios that I've had to have these kind of like long conversations and battles where like, I'm not putting together a packet. I'm not taking 180 days, or let's say at that point, 170 days of school and cramming it into a packet so a student can pass the class. It's not realistic. It's not equitable. And it's definitely not how students are going to learn. Now, even if a student could finish 50 spreadsheets or 50, excuse me, even if a student could finish 50 worksheets in a matter of a week, hopefully they could do that. Would they learn? Would they really have a lot of learning by just putting information on a piece of paper? Now, if they already knew the work and they just chose not to do the work, that's a different thing, right? Because we have some students who are just like, I don't want to do the homework. I don't want to do it. I'm not going to do it. And they fight it just for principle. Now, I can tell you about one student in particular. I'm not going to say his name. His initials were JD. Yeah. So this student, he hated homework. Now, he was supposed to be potentially in geometry, but he said that for whatever reason, his counselor didn't move him to geometry because he had already taken algebra in 8th grade. So I'm a 9th grade teacher. And I said, okay, well, go talk to your counselor. If they're supposed to switch you, then they can switch you. But for whatever reason, he didn't get credit for algebra in 8th grade because he didn't do any of the homework. So he failed algebra. I mean, it's the second season of his resistance coming up in his face. And now he's upset with me because I'm the algebra teacher. And I'm like, brother, what are you talking about? Like, you didn't pass algebra. Like, you didn't get the grade. You may know the work, but you didn't get the grade. So what do you want me to do? And so in this conversation, we were like he wanted to have a negotiation with me. What if I just do no homework? Can I still pass? I'm like, no, your homework is like 30% of your grade. What are you talking about? And our negotiation with this young man, JD, was, look, okay, you show me for 1 week that you can do the homework. Like, he was smart. He was a smart kid. Now, I'm also realistic. Like, you're smart, you're brilliant. I don't want to like make you hate school. I want you to know that there are responsibilities too. And I'm also not willing to like be like, oh, okay, just don't do it and then I'll pass you anyway. So we had to have a negotiation. So we had a negotiation, and I'll tell you what I negotiated with this student and his mom, because I wanted to sure his mom was in on the deal. Okay, for 1 week, you cannot miss any assignments. Now, he never really missed classwork, but he just didn't do any homework. He had his own will around that. I said, for 1 week, you show me that you can do homework every day. No excuses, no complaints. After 1 week, I'm going to give you 5 weeks until the next test to do no homework. If you get below a C, you can't even get a C on the test. You got to get a B. If you get below a B on this test, then you're going back to doing homework every day, which means I expect that if you are this knowledgeable, then you should get passing B's and A's on your tests. If you miss a B on a test, you're going back to doing homework like everyone else. The deal was revoked. And you know what this young man did? He passed his class with an A. We had an agreement. We made a plan. We had a strategy. We had a consequence. And he was like, okay, I'm all for it. So he didn't do any homework. He passed every test with almost flying colors. And I wish that he had done his work in middle school. I wish somebody had sat him down and had a negotiation with him before. But guess what? What ends up happening is if the power plays are at plays, and as a teacher, if I don't get to have a discussion with a student, if I'm trying to like support them, but also not getting the support I need, then ultimately I feel like I'm just following orders of a system that is not really equitable or works for students. That is what happens. Now, that's different than just directly burnout, but it is what happens when you cause burnout. If I, as a teacher, is trying to do my best, trying to make sure that I'm creating a classroom that's teaching 30 kids at a time, trying to have individual learning plans for each individual student because they're all unique and different. Those are the things that happen. Now, when I say 30, I'm talking about 30 at a time, 5 times or 6 times or 7 times a day. Over 150 plus students every day, trying to support them in the way that each individual student's needs sometimes can be overwhelming. So that's burnout. Now, let's move to the next topic. The next topic is heavy workloads and staff shortages. Heavy workloads and staff shortages. So recent research shows that 90% of schools in the U.S. are struggling with understaffing. Working with fewer or less experienced staff means teachers have to pick up additional work. This includes handling larger class sizes, covering more subjects or grade levels, taking on more admin such as grading assignments, working more with parents, for example, coordinating schedules for parent-teacher conferences, adapting lesson plans to provide specialized support for students with learning difficulties. Now, if you already as a teacher are teaching 150, 160 students a day, let's say you have a 7-period school day or a 6-period school day with one prep, you have about 30 students per class, that could be 180 students depending on the size of your school. If you're trying to do work to support 180 students, it is hard when you have a lot of individual needs in those 180. That means how many different individual lesson plans am I making to try and make accommodations for each student? Now, as a teacher, you have a responsibility around that, but we have to name that is a lot. It is not just I come and teach the middle and everyone's happy. It's I teach and then I have the students who are advanced or like this is too little, too boring. The students who have not yet gotten to this level or like this is too much. I don't know what you're talking about. And the students in the middle are probably maybe the ones who are finally able to, okay, I'm good with what you're doing right here. And you're navigating all these levels of the scaffolding that needs to happen in the classroom. And so it's really important. But the heavy workloads and staff shortages create a lot of work for teachers. I'm going to read a quote from a teacher in this part. I couldn't do the job the way I wanted to. The more competent you are, the more they throw at you, which I know is normal. But I had a whole bunch of classes with needy students. And the responsibility that came with that was time consuming and stressful on top of multiple preps, including AP, assessment class. I was losing the rest of my life outside of teaching and dreaded going to work. I never knew how long it would take to get ready for the next day. I've always been a bit of a perfectionist, and 20 years of that has been a lot of stress. Also, COVID zapped the motivation and ability to focus for many students. So not only are teachers feeling the pressure because if you are if you're a very effective teacher, then the administration is like, I need to lean on this teacher more because there's more needs. And that can be overloading for teachers. The last quote I read here, it says, the public school landscape was becoming increasingly political. While I had a great administration, the restrictions being put in place, along with the increasing work hours outside of what I was contractually obligated to perform, made the future of a career in teaching look quite bleak. I had good rapport with students and managed my classroom well, but after returning back to in-person teaching, I could tell that students' behavior was becoming more of an issue, and the disruptions caused by a lack of respect and care were increasing. I mean, imagine if you, as a teacher, a room of 100, not a room of 100, thank goodness, a room of 30 kids that you are trying to teach, and in that room, you have the students who can do this work blindfolded because they know this work and they've done extra homework at home. They have brothers and sisters who push them harder. They actually want more work. They want extra work. In the same room, you have a student who showed up, no materials, blaming you for getting on their nerves. In the same space. Now, when students came back to schools, we have many teachers who have expressed the challenge of helping students figure out how to learn in a new space. They went from being at home in front of their computer, looking at the screen, no one judging them, no one to the left or to the right, on the floor, doing their homework on the couch, doing the homework on their bed, like doing the homework wherever it was comfortable for them. And now they're back in these hard, rickety desks, chairs, dirty bathrooms. Now I'm naming some tough situations out there. Maybe everyone had nice bathrooms, but we if you've been to any school USA, you can imagine that they're not all created equal. And so what happens when students are stressed out and they come to class, the teacher is trying to navigate all these things while everyone is like maybe on the outside saying everything is fine. And that is the work for teachers, the deeper work for having an education. As a teacher, when I came to education, I came from an engineering career. I came from a career where you work until the job is done. You were on salary. You do whatever it takes. There was no contractual number of hours in the engineering field. You're on a project. If there's a concrete pour at 6 a.m., you're there at 5:50, 5:30, making sure the trucks are lined up, making sure that everyone is where they're supposed to be. You're there observing the pour, making sure they're not adding more water to the mix. Like all the pieces that you did it because it was part of the job. When I came to teaching, there was another thing. It was like, wait, what was it? What's a contract thing? I didn't even know about a contract. I didn't know about a contract until I heard a teacher saying something about a contract. Now, one of the things I recognized was that teachers, because their workload is so heavy, there's contracts in place because there's been situations where teachers were taken advantage of. It is so important that we understand the layers of work that happen, especially for those who don't teach, those who don't understand the profession. It's so important that you understand the nuance of things that happen because as a teacher, my workload doesn't end when the day ends. If school's over at 3:15 and I have a contractually I'll stay till 3:45, then I have 30 minutes to try and get ready for the next 180 students the next day. Now, have you ever tried to prepare for a workshop or a class or a group of people and you had to have materials ready, you had to have things organized? 30 minutes is not necessarily enough of time for that. So is there going to be time I'm going to take stuff home? How am I going to grade 180 pieces of paper? How am I going to read 180 essays? How am I going to review 180 narratives? Like the idea that people don't pay attention about how education works is because the work is heavy. And most times people think, well, look, you should just be happy. You get all these holidays, you get summers off. That's not how it works. You don't get summers off. Summers are unpaid. It's not off. Yeah, what am I going to do if I have no money? What if I'm going to sit at home with no money for 2 months and figure out how to stretch this last check in June to the first check in September or October? That's what ends up happening. So teachers are picking up summer jobs to fill in the gaps. That is what's happening in education that sometimes happen behind the scenes. Okay, so let me move on. Okay, the final topic that I want to cover today, and it probably is not, I'm not trying to squeeze it in, but I'm going to tell you about one that we're going to have to come back to because it is one that comes up over and over and over again. And we've already seen a lot of it happening this year. We're talking about safety issues in school. Now, most times when we talk about safety issues in school, we talk about school shootings. Now, I want to let you know that there's a lot more areas of challenge in schools than school shootings. But we can't ignore the fact that there is a tremendous safety issue in terms of school shootings. We can't ignore it, and we can't pretend like we don't notice it. Now, if you're an adult who goes to a job that feels safe and secure behind your badged entry for your job, that's different than when you walk into a public school today. Because what you experienced growing up, maybe the young people that you may work with know, or even your own children are experiencing a different world. And what they feel and what they think about and what they hear when they hear loud sounds triggers more things in them than it probably did for you going to school. Now, in 2023, there were 349 school shootings. In 2024, there were 330 school shootings. So far this year, today, I'm going to just tell you the date so you get date. Today's the 28th of January. Today's the 28th of January, 2025. And so far this year, there have been 13 school shootings, like one every other day. Now, listen, I just want you to know that there's something to be said about what is happening with our young people. What's happening with their emotional wellness, what's happening with their ability to navigate pain, suffering, challenges. There's a quote by educator Parker Palmer where he said, "Violence is what happens when we don't know what to do with our suffering. Let me read part of this article from Devlin Peck about why teachers are leaving the profession and about safety issues. This lack of safety is a very obvious reason why teachers quit their roles in mass each year. Many feel that there are not enough security measures in place to protect them and their students. For example, one survey showed that 70% of teachers want class size reduced. It also showed that they receive less than 50% of the mental health support they feel they need, not only for students, but for the teachers as well. Safety issues also cause problems with school culture that teachers just can't fix. Behavioral issues have continued to rise over the past 4 years, according to research from the Ed Week Research Center. And it's pretty hard to discipline students when there's a pervasive sense of insecurity and fear within the school environment. This one quote is really telling from an educator. She said, the educator said in this quote, "I loved my school and what I was doing. However, in February 2020, right before the pandemic, a student took a gun to school. He had no intention of using it, but he accidentally shot and killed another student. It was just devastating because one of the students involved had been my students the previous year. The school is a good school. The kids are good kids, but it was hard to shake that off. After that, I started looking into other things I could do." You know, if you're a person who's listening to this and your school has not had a school shooting, I think just let's hold on to hope that that will continue to be the data that comes out of your school. If you have a person who have never experienced a shooting happening around you, consider yourself blessed in a space where you have not experienced that pain. If you've not witnessed someone else shot before, consider yourself also in a place of, man, I have some parts of myself that I've not experienced how other people experience the world. And so if you haven't experienced it happening around you, near you, at your school, in front of you, then it will be almost impossible for you to be able to tell someone else how quickly they should get over it. The number of school shootings doesn't just affect the person shot. It affects the person who witnessed it. It affects the people down the hall who heard it and then who replayed the story over and over again about the fear of hiding in a closet or hiding under their desk while the school's on shutdown. You don't get to decide what happens in someone else because of what they experienced. And even for students who are at schools where there's never been a shooting at all, the fact that you walk to school every day, so meeting students who say all kinds of wild things, realizing that, man, any one of these students who wanted to have a bad day could make a bad move and our lives are infected forever. Listen, we have work to do. We have work to do to not only make our schools safer, we have work to do to make sure that we are providing space for educators to feel safe in those schools. Now, with all the changes coming in schools, with all the changes coming, we also know that there's plenty of people out there who say, oh, just give teachers guns. Now, I'll just say this as a teacher who was a hothead. I've never shot anybody. I have no plans of shooting anybody. But I've had plenty of kids walk up in my face and say, Branch. I mean, you could beep that one out. Like, I've had plenty of students that walked up to me and my space was invaded and my mind was like, calm down, Ashanti. You're not in threat. You're not in danger. You're not in danger. But I'm a 6'1", 300-pound guy. That's who I am. All teachers don't look like me or have the stature of me. I've had students who were bigger than me. I am telling you that we need to make sure that we're providing safety for those schools where we're not expecting teachers to walk around with weapons that are designed to hurt and harm, because everyone says, well, they're just there to protect. But weapons are the creation of the need for the protection. If you get my point. If you recognize that all weapons aren't used to protect, some are used in the act of hate. So anyway, as I can go deeper into this issue, but when I talk about the fact that all weapons, all violence in schools is not about just the guns, not about shootings, it's about the bullying. We can see that on many stages in our world today, how bullying takes effect, how the fear, not only of 12-year-olds or 5-year-olds or 7-year-olds at an elementary school or middle school, we see fear in the halls of Congress by bullying. We see fear in the world outside by bullying. Those type of violence, that type of safety also creates a lot of stress in students because it's not happening sometimes in broad daylight. It's happening in the quiet of the back of the room. It's happening in the hallway when no one saw the person get pushed down. It happens in the locker room. It happens on the playground. All the ways that other types of safety issues show up. We're only talking about one right now, and we have more to talk about. So listen, folks, I want you to know, and let me come back to the bullying part because I don't want to leave this part out so that you understand that I'm just like some person just railing on bullying. Let me talk about it. I was bullied in middle school. So when I speak about bullying, won't be the last time we'll talk about this. I will be coming back to this topic very soon. But I need you to know that there's more going on to the student that's being bullied than probably you could even ever imagine of somebody just being picked on. It is an internal conversation that goes and repeats over and over again. And I want you to know that there's so much more than you can see by just looking at the situation on the outside. And if you've never been bullied, you can consider yourself lucky for being one of those. But if you have, I want you to know that I see you. You're not alone. And if your child is dealing with it or your students are dealing with it, please don't let it go ignored. We've experienced two in California, two tragic losses of life in California of students who've been bullied this year, this school year, not 2025, but this academic school year. And I'm asking you not to be one who just ignores it. It's sometimes difficult to deal with because you can't say, I saw it. You can't say what you saw. You say something felt a little off. Please let somebody know. If your child is experiencing, they're coming to you saying that something's happening, please take it to the school immediately. That's what my ask to you. In these conversations, we're going to be talking to more male educators. I think that as we begin to talk about education and begin to show some data and some research out there, we need you to be a part of these conversations. So if you know a teacher, educator, parent, administrator, please share this episode with them. Let them know that they're not alone. Let them know that we see them. And if you know any male educator that you think should be in these conversations, please connect them with us. All the information is in the show notes on how to reach out to us. And we look forward to seeing you again soon on Taking Off the Mask, Unmasking with Male Educators. Thank you for being a part of this conversation today. We'll see you soon. Bye now.